My name is Rachel. What's your name? My name is Grace. Hi, I'm Noreen. This is my sign name. Lovely. And what's your role in Kara? Yes, I work for Kara, and my role is the communications and deaf culture manager. What that means is that I have a lot to do with the community and ensuring that our team and Kara understand about deaf culture and also for the leadership team there as well. Hi, my role is the head of delivery and project management. I make sure that Kara has, if any projects are coming through, I organise, I plan, I put them into the spreadsheet to make sure I have the right people and that the projects run smoothly. Thank you very much for explaining your roles, Grace and Noreen. Today we're talking about AI. It's a hot topic in the community at the moment. And I know that for many of the deaf community who have sent through your questions that you want to ask the team at Kara, that's amazing, fantastic. It's a really good opportunity to ask some questions to Grace and Noreen. Are you ready? Yeah, okay, bring it on. Wonderful. Okay. So if we're looking at translations done with AI, if there's information that is either wrong or not clear, that could actually impact deaf people's access to communication. There could affect their communication rights. Who's responsible, and how do you approach to resolve some of those issues? Well, first of all, when we're translating information, the translations are always right. It's not that the translations are wrong. It's the only way that information can be done wrong is if the script in English is not correct. But that will then be taken and translated. So who's responsible? Well, yes, of course, Kara is responsible, is accountable. We take accountability. Yeah. Right, and if the information is wrong, how do they get in touch with you to let you know about there's some wrong information? I think, Rachel, it's good to clarify that if the translation style or the approach doesn't quite work, but the information itself, like Grace is saying, that because we use English text, we're not taking information from an audio signal, and it's not really then possible to misinterpret something from an audio signal. What we're using is text. So, for example, if it says 5 p.m., 5 o'clock in the evening, then the AI will translate that to 5 p.m. The translation can't then become 6 p.m. or something that's made up. It will follow the text. So where mistakes can happen around grammar or sign language choice or the style that it might be done in that may best fit community preferences, that's where we can continue to improve, reflect, gather feedback on those areas. How it works is that the community can give us feedback, for example, for Auckland Transport, when we have given out this project, it's gone live, we always do feedback at the same time, have a process for that. So the community can feedback while a project is going ahead, and we're committed to collecting the feedback, working with Auckland Transport, for example, in this situation. The sign language team gets together and reviews any feedback that's come through, looks at possible updates, looks at our templates, and then puts an update out. And we then look for some more feedback. We come together, we look at the feedback, and we create that feedback cycle between Kara and the organisation that we're working with and the community. We can't create something that's perfect first time. We actually have to go on that journey together. We now have a question about ethics, and I know that internationally that there are some frameworks around AI is best used and so on. And we have a question about Kara and any ethical frameworks or statements that you might have, guidelines about developing avatars, or about the process in producing AI information. And is that information available to the public? Yes, it is. We have a strong position statement, which is on our blog, which is available on our website for anyone to see. And it's about how we ensure that we are following good processes. We always say it's by deaf, with deaf, for deaf. How we achieve that is that we have 3 different levels of decision making. First of all, we have an advisory group that provides guidelines, vision, and planning. Secondly, with deaf, we have deaf staff in our team. So obviously, I'm deaf myself, and also the sign language team are all deaf. And so that's part of our work. And we're also about for deaf, for the deaf community. And if there's anyone in the community has areas that they want to see improvements, or they say, hey, I want to see avatars used in this area, I don't want to see them used in that area, we're really open to listening, to hearing about how this could work. We have a very strong ethical basis. Also, it's not only about having a position statement, which we do have, we're also heavily involved internationally. We were at SLX AI, the first international conference around sign language and AI, and we were the platinum sponsor for the event because we believe in getting together, seeing who's there, what's out there, what can we best do practically. And while we were there, we were also heavily involved in what's called COSET, which is a subsidiary of the Safe AI team. Our team in America, they have involvement in both developing bylaws, creating ethical guidelines related to AI. We have an MOU with them, and our team is already involved voluntarily. Grace is part of this, using their time every month to have discussions around the things that we're heavily trying to not only support, but also encourage people to look what's out there, because we believe that AI is not only about something that anyone can use and put out there. It must be endorsed, it must be proven, it must be that deaf people are included, that there are deaf staff that are included in the development of sign language AI. Many places don't have those deaf people involved. So for us, we always have it. So you can see Molly's blog that she writes on our website. It's a lovely blog, and it's got over the last few months on our website. And one thing I also want to add is that we have a strong statement around we go at the speed of trust. We need to make sure that we build trust with the community and ensure that there's a two-way conversation happening. We can't go ahead without the community. That's breaking trust. So we need to ensure that we're working with deaf people. If people are saying, hey, you need to slow down, great. We're happy to look at that. What are the ways that we can support? How can we educate? What can we be doing to ensure that we're doing this appropriately? That's a statement for Kara. Great, thank you. That's really good to know. And you were saying you went to Boston in the States recently, Noreen, and that's what you're talking about, that conference? Oh, I see. Yes, that's what I mean when I talk about that. Okay, we're going to talk more about that conference later on. That'll be interesting. When it comes to other organisations in New Zealand, Aotearoa, that may approach Kara that don't have deaf people in their organisation, so what do you normally do? What do you recommend to organisations that might approach you? Yeah, that often happens. We've had it, a few times, where there are some organisations that come to us and they want to work with us on a particular project that uses AI and sign language. The first thing we always ask is, who are the deaf people in your team? If they don't have any deaf people, then we recommend that they need to first of all develop those relationships. If they don't, then we're not able to work with them. They must have deaf people as part of their team. Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, that's clear. I agree, and I think that we have two services. We have our pure AI, which is really for time-critical information that needs to get out. If there's a lot of information and a human interpreter isn't available, then we try and use templated AI system that's always using our deaf team to work with that, and we need to work with the community as well. So Auckland Transport, this particular project is a really good example. There's no deaf people there, but they see that there's a need, and they're seeing us working together on creating something. So it's always part of the contractual agreement that there needs to be community involvement, there needs to be involvement from the organisation and from Kara. Secondly, for our hybrid system, which we're planning to sell, when we do sell that service, there are terms and conditions related to that. So if any organisation was wanting to use our system, our translation system, for their own communications, they need to agree to our conditions. If they breach that, then we will no longer be providing that service. So that's something that we're looking at down the line. Earlier on, though, in the process, we need to ensure that we're building trust with the community, trust with organisations about how this is used. That's the first step that we're looking to build. Later on, it'll become more used and so on, but our foundation is to ensure that we're all keeping accountable to what we need to be doing correctly. And as you said, that there's some monitoring that is required, Noreen. So if something does go wrong, say in the use of the hybrid system, do you monitor those translations? Yeah, well, there's a lot of security related to that. If it's not appropriate, then that's a breach of terms and conditions. So that's something I think, first of all, we need to build up trust with the organizations. We can't have organizations that just suddenly sign up online and start using the system. We actually need to have face to face conversations, get to know what the purpose is. And, if any of you out there have any more questions related to ethics, please do get in touch with either of us anytime. More than welcome. Our door is open. Great. Okay. Well, now we're going to move on to our next question around deaf culture and language. We know that AI generation translation is available and out there in the community. How do you ensure that the translations that are generated, that they are appropriate to native New Zealand Sign Language, they're not influenced by ASL or other languages? And when it comes to cultural communication, because there's such a variation in New Zealand Sign Language styles and communication, how do you ensure that the translations are able to accommodate those levels or understanding of communication? So, how do you make sure that these things are accounted for? Well, when it comes to ensuring that the translations are native New Zealand Sign Language translations, in our projects, we always, of course, look initially at where the projects are based, whether they be in America, Britain, New Zealand. And we ensure that the person who is signing is a person from that country. So for the ASL translations, they are ASL native users. If they are New Zealand, then they were using New Zealand signers for that. So we ensure that all of our work is particular to the country that it's required for. And we have databases for Auslan, for New Zealand Sign Language, for ASL, etc., to keep those areas discrete. And when it comes to trying to meet the needs of the deaf community, even between Noreen and myself, we have variations in how we sign, right? So we want to make sure that the information is clear to people. What we do is we tag signs and ensure that the sign has a particular name, or is it a noun, is it a verb, is it an adjective? What context is that particular sign used for? So, like, if you think about bat, B-A-T, that can have different meanings, an animal or an object for sports. So we tag also where that sign is used. Is it used by young people? Is it used by people in the north or south? Is it, for example, the sign for girl and boy? There are older signs for girl and boy. There are more common signs used in modern NZSL. So those are areas that we tag within our database. In our software, which is called KNS, which is Kara Notation System, which is a unique program that we've developed, and we've trained it with lots of different rules, lots of different pieces of information that explain to the system not to translate in an English-like manner, because we know New Zealand Sign Language has its own structures and ways of communicating. So we are training the KNS system to sign in a New Zealand Sign Language-like manner. So, for example, what's my name could be turned to my name is what, in terms of the syntax of that. But it's not done and dusted. We always look at how we can improve it. Language is always evolving, and we always need to review it. And so we're making sure that we're working with the system to make sure that it's up to date. And so that's how we make sure we think our languages are separate, and we also make sure that we're meeting the needs of diverse community members. And I think that, for Noreen, Grace, the two of us, we're not part of the New Zealand Sign Language team. Just make that clear. We're actually not, because we have a lot to do with other sign language overseas, and so our own style of sign language is a bit mixed because of that. So we're not involved in the approval process or the review or the editing process. That's not our role. That's the role of the New Zealand Sign Language team for the New Zealand project, and that's the same for the US team and other countries. So I just wanted to make that really clear to the community here. That's how we work. Yeah, and our team are qualified. We haven't just brought in people off the street, someone who knows a bit of sign language. That we've got people who have done the Deaf Studies qualification, and they're ones who are in our team. But that's also about making sure that Kara is covered, and we're making sure we're protecting ourselves around that area. The KNS system that Grace talked about is quite complicated, and I kind of think about it like a recipe. So there are different ingredients that you need to put into a recipe. It might be that the eyebrows need to go up or down, or that the mouth needs to have a particular mouth pattern. So signs are one part of it, and there's lots of tagging and information around signs, but we're also inputting a lot of information about non-manual signals, non-manual aspects of sign language communication. But when it's produced, it's not perfect. We know the production of the translation isn't perfect, but every day, every week, every month, we're improving it. Oh, absolutely. When I look back to 6 years ago when I first started working for Kara, wow, compared to what we have now, we've just come ahead in leaps and bounds. And I see there's been really mind-blowing developments, and to look back and see how far we've come and how much more there is to go. Yeah, I think AI is a really big topic, and we have KNS that we use, our notation system. That's ours. We own that. And that keeps us safe. That's something that we can trust. It's something that we can train. We're not using any random AI system out there, and there's lots of different styles of AI tools, but we're using our own system. So that's also something quite important to say. When it comes to translation, we have a system that we can edit. We can add additional non-manuals. We can add role shifts and other aspects of sign language. It's really important that there's a deaf person who's qualified, who's done deaf studies here in New Zealand. They have the deaf studies qualification. They're the ones who are ensuring that the language is appropriate to then be going out, published. So when it comes to AI translations, what can you tell us a bit about the process, how it actually works? Like you say, and we have to think about sign language standards and think about, there's lots of different variation within the community, different signs that are used. There's different age groups and so on. So that's important to think about. I did want to ask a question about the advisory group that you mentioned, and then you talked about staff working at Kara and then the community. And you've encouraged people to come along. You say you have a Wednesday burger lunch. You can invite people to that to talk to you. That sounds really cool. What other ways are there for the deaf community to connect with you and give you information? Yeah, well, like you say, we have 3 kind of different tiers of decision making and information sharing. So in the US, we meet regularly with the advisory group, and they have 2 purposes. One is to give us guidance on where we should really be looking to go next, looking at our next steps, and we also use their networks. So friends, families, others in their networks, to get feedback on where is it going for the service. And we had an advisory group in New Zealand about 3 or 4 years ago, but the problem was we didn't have the New Zealand Sign Language database available to use it. Now that here we are, we have a sign language database we're developing, and so we're going to be looking at establishing an advisory group here in New Zealand soon. That's really important to have an advisory group that has oversight and is able to feed down to the different levels of decision making. At Kara, our staff, we feel like we're a bit the meat in the sandwich. We've got an advisory group on one side, we're the meat in the sandwich, and then we've got the community on the other side. And so for the advisory group, how do you recruit people for that in terms of establishing something in New Zealand? How would you go about that? Noreen, do you want to say something about that? Well, I think we need to ensure that we have the appropriate representation. That's really important. It also depends on people's time commitments and people who have the understanding and the ability in this area of AI. And it may be that there are particular subjects or particular organisational focuses, if it's to do with deaf advocacy, or it might be around deaf professionals. In a New Zealand context, Turi Māori, that's a really important aspect to be involved in the advisory group. So it's really about what does the community feel is the appropriate representation to have on an advisory group. We're not randomly picking people to be on a group. We need to first establish an appropriate process and ensure that the people with the right ability and the right needs that the community are informing us or informing the group to be. So as Grace said, we tried it the other way before. That didn't work, and we learned from that. And so it's about us building up now our New Zealand Sign Language database, and then the next step will be to establish an updated advisory group here in New Zealand. And what's important, I think, also, and what we learnt we still have a lot of data and information from the past. The advisory group have said, hey, focus on transport. So that's what we're doing. We're focusing on Auckland Transport right now as a result of advice we were given. Yeah, and I think we're quite fortunate in New Zealand because we have the interest of Whaikaha, of the New Zealand Sign Language Board, and others. It's not only Kara doing this work. We want to be ethical. We want to make sure that we are following community values. And, potentially in New Zealand, we could look at working more as a collective. I think that would be amazing because that would mean there's wider representation in the US and in other countries. Each country has their own approach, different style, different cultures, and so on. So we've really had to work with the context of other cultures. But it'd be really interesting here in New Zealand, and we really will respect whatever is required and needed here. Wonderful, thank you for that. We have some other questions also related to the deaf community and about the deaf community's voice in AI. So, Kara, you've been developing a sign language avatar and testing it. How do you ensure that the deaf community is able to participate in this? Well, I think if we go back to Auckland Transport, I think it's just such a good example, and it's quite topical at the moment. There's an app that Auckland Transport have. That's something that we planned for phase 3. We're actually doing in phase 1. I think we first started working with Auckland Transport about 18 months ago, and we have different phases of work that we're doing. In phase 1, it was really around just a small focus group where we looked at some practice translations for a particular thing, where we looked at using we had a male avatar at that time. We worked with Tū Kokiri, and we worked with some of the deaf community to get some feedback, ask people who would like to be involved, expressions of interest. So let the community tell us who they want to be involved. We had some timeframes for that and got some feedback. The feedback was like the background was bright pink, it was a bit of an eyesore for people. And some people said, that particular male avatar was fine, but they wanted to kind of change it up a bit. And we gave that feedback to Auckland Transport. In the second phase, we developed a new avatar, which is the one that you see now. We also developed, with that avatar, further discussions with Tū Kokiri, deaf youth. So getting the deaf youth voice is really important because they're going to be using this going forward, right? Yeah. So we worked a lot with younger deaf people. Also, we've investigated a new name for the avatar, looked at different clothing, different background, and gave some examples, which was then approved, which is more pleasing visually. We also went to the Auckland Deaf Society, where there was a deaf festival back in 2025. I think it was in September, which was a great opportunity because we had a booth right next to Auckland Transport. So we were there together to work together to let people know. And we had a name, a vote for the name, and came up with the name Tui. We don't have a sign name for Tui yet, but that's something that we're in discussions with, and we're going to work with the community to come up with a sign name for the avatar. Yeah. So these are some ways we're improving that and about the translation. So going back to phase 1, we had a whole lot of videos to translate, and then we were given some feedback about the way that you've put that is you've put actually issues around the train at the very end, put that at the beginning. So there's that kind of information that's really important about how we even structure the translations, and that affects how those that information then is best and most efficiently understood by the community, rather than watching a translation that's got a lot of background information. Just keep it snappy, keep it focused. So it's those sorts of things that we are doing to keep the community involved. When it comes to deaf, blind, and hearing impaired people, are there some ways that they can be involved in giving feedback? Yes, we actually had a deaf, blind staff member for a while in our team. So that was just so valuable because we were able to get feedback about things that we don't know about. So when we were given feedback on focus on this or don't do that, we had that right from the beginning of our development process. We're also part of the Website Accessibility Advisory Group, which has a number of guidelines that we have incorporated into our planning and development. For example, the colours of the background, contrast with the signing, the size of captions, ensuring that everything is accessible visually. Also, whether we can speed up or slow down the signing speed, and also have been working on how we can invert the colours so it depends on the community's needs, and they can make some of those adjustments themselves. So we're very aware of deafblind needs in the community and ensure that we're making our information is accessible. Yes, and related to what Grace was saying at the moment for Auckland Transport and the live project we have, we're asking for the community to give us ongoing feedback. And if any deafblind people out there have any more feedback that you'd like to give, we believe we're meeting the WAAG guidelines. But if you in the community still want to have additional aspects or things that we don't know about, as Grace said, we are following guidelines, but sometimes the guidelines themselves can miss things that people in the community really need. So if the areas that we can improve on, we welcome to hear, and we'll make those changes. So I've got a question here about whether AI will replace humans. It's an interesting one to talk about, right? So I know that people in the community are a bit concerned about AI. They see a lot of news about AI replacing people in their jobs and so on. So that is a concern in thinking about Kara developing avatars. Will that impact on people doing translation work or on interpreting work? So that's a question that the community has. Can you explain to us how our avatar translations and human translators, whether they're going to be replaced by this technology? No. Yeah, well, first of all, on that topic, AI avatars are not going to replace human interpreters. We really strongly believe in encouraging the development of deaf translator roles, and there are places where avatars can be used and where it's inappropriate for them to be used. We need to ensure that the deaf community, their skills and their translation abilities, and needs to be done. We need to support that and encourage that. There's a lot of information out there that, for example, on websites, I think websites is a really kind of interesting area where we're thinking about, do we have enough capacity for translation of all the websites that are available in the world? No, there's limits on time and budget. So it's those kinds of areas where the hybrid translation can be done. And in other areas where you've got a deaf person can do it, or where there's a preference for that to be done with a human interpreter, translator, well, they should do so. I think for those of you out there who are just a bit unsure about what Kara is doing, might just break that down a little bit more, because I think when it comes to human translators and the work that they do, we do actually have budgets for specific things there, and those specific things for translation don't cover every piece of information that's available out there in the world. So we're looking at areas where there are no budgets, and websites is one such area. Many companies, they don't bother to translate their information because the information changes regularly on their website. And if you update your website, then you have to pay to get a completely new translation done into New Zealand Sign Language. So you might only change 2 or 3 words on your website, and you can't continue to pay for translations to be done. Organizations are not interested in that. But if you look at a new tool like the Kara hybrid, we call it hybrid. This is the sign we use because it's AI and it does involve human interaction. It's about working together with AI and humans. So in this hybrid system, the AI does the first pass of the translation, and that's like a draft document that is a gloss. And then the translator, the deaf person, can then make changes to that gloss, to that translation, before it is then published, and can give that to the organisation who's wants the translation. And if they want it updated, we can open up the same document. It takes 2 or 3 minutes of time to make the changes, and then publish that again. It's approved by a deaf person, ensures that there's that satisfaction, and ensures that the website is up to date for the organisation, and it's something they can reasonably afford to make some changes to their website, but while also making it accessible. And so these are the opportunities we think that are out there in new areas that aren't currently being covered. So will human interpreters be replaced? No. So can you explain a little bit more about why they won't be replaced? Well, I mean, interpreters are wonderful. One other thing about our avatar AI is that it's one way. It's not a two-way communication. It doesn't have the ability to analyze a situation and a deaf person's communication needs and whether or not a person's understood the information and requires further extrapolation of information. A qualified interpreter can do that, can stop a situation, take some time to break things down, and then carry on. This is not what we are here for. And I think that the medical example is quite useful to explain what we're thinking. What we are thinking about in Kara is that the avatar augments interpreting. So if a deaf person has a doctor's appointment, of course you need a human interpreter there. And the doctor says, okay, your operation is tomorrow, and here's the pre-operation checks or post-op checks, and there can be quite a lot of complicated information in it. The deaf person might receive that, the appointment's over, and the interpreter says, hey, I've got to go to my next appointment, see you. And the deaf person's left with their document that's got all the checks on it, that's all in English, and that's where an avatar can support, maybe by having a QR code that then says you're not allowed to eat 8 hours before your operation. You can have water up to 3 hours, 3 hours, whatever, all the things involved in a pre-op and post-op checklist. If after the operation you've got an infection, you need to go here, do this, and so on. So another example, or before you move on to the other example, Grace, can I just also add to that? So if, for example, you have a QR code on the form, people might say, well, there's different levels of language and understanding. And if that information is on a document and you had a human check that translation to suit a particular level, it can be the translation can be made for those who really need the information broken down with a whole lot of examples, or it can be made for those who work in other areas. So we need to work with the Ministry of Education, work with the community to ensure that whatever the avatar is, that there are also some options in terms of my level of understanding and what I need to know. The hybrid service, because that's actually about creating new jobs where you've got deaf people involved in creating appropriate translations. Yeah, and I think it's not only the pre and post-op checklists, but also when you go to medical appointments, there's a whole lot of pamphlets that you often come across that can talk about a whole range of medical issues, and you might see some nice pictures, but it's all in English. But that could be relevant to the appointment that you're having. So if there are avatar translations, it's more efficient to have a human interpreter in the context of a consultation with a doctor. But then there's also other resources that are available for a deaf person who can teach themselves and learn about what's in these other resources. So, there's so many different examples that I know. Our time is limited today, but that's just how we're ensuring that we're not here to get rid of human interpreters and take over. We're here to support. We're here, I use the word augment. Noreen says that's too technical a word, but I mean, otherwise it's to supplement. Okay, so that's what we're saying. We're here, interpreters, we respect, we never want to see that reduced. What we're here to do is to provide additional access to information. And I think with pre and post-op checklists, you kind of ask, why haven't those been translated in the past? It's because they're unique, because you need to think about the level of translation, the date, the time required in that context. You can't have a human interpreter translate that every time for every person. But if we have worked with deaf people to ensure that we have, like with Auckland Transport, we have templates that the AI is doing a good job of creating translations with the deaf perspective. Thanks for explaining that around pre and post-op medical information, and I'm sure there's many of you out there who've had that experience of not understanding that information, or interpreters had to leave, and so there are some ways of making things a little bit more accessible. I want to go back and talk a bit more about ethics. You talked about a particular group, yes, COSET. Can you explain a bit more about what that is? COSET is really a subsidiary of Safe AI. Safe AI is a larger group that looks at how AI can be used safely. So there's a subsidiary group which is based in the US, COSET, which is related to our US side of Kara's business, but it is part of an international group. COSET wants to progress bylaws that are being developed at the moment, so we're involved in supporting them to evaluate different AI translation companies or sign language services that use AI, and really have a closer look at, are deaf people involved? How are the signs created ethically? Where is that data coming from? And then from there, they're able to give an endorsement. And be amazing in future to think about that. It's a lot of work that they're doing themselves. We've got a lot of work to do ourselves in terms of working together internationally in this area. But if this can happen where we get an official endorsement where some companies could say, hey, we've been evaluated, we've been endorsed, and others haven't, that means when it comes to future tendering of services, well, then those that have been endorsed and have been through that evaluation process, this is the dream. Kara would love to see more of that. Oh, wow. Sounds excellent. It sounds a little bit like with the different frameworks and different approaches that people are taking, but endorsement is more like a stronger approach to showing your ethical background. Yeah, around the world, we're in kind of early stages. Some are more advanced than others in terms of these conversations, but, hats off to everyone for moving in this area. And I know when it comes to some information in New Zealand, we might be behind in some areas, and I think it's really important to just, keep those connections going, sharing information about it. Yeah, we really want to make sure that there's information out there, because at the moment, does the deaf community have full access? Does the deaf community have 100% access to information? No. We really value human interpreters, but they can't be everywhere. They can't be at every airport gate to let people know that, hey, your plane has been delayed, or you need to move to a different gate. These things aren't possible. We wish that was, but it's just not. But this is where avatars can support the information that's being communicated. And then that really makes sure that we're meeting the UN Convention on Rights of People with Disabilities. Those sorts of things, making sure that sign language is actually recognised and is available and celebrated. So in your perspective, the translations done by AI, as you say, it's a tool to augment communication and accessibility. Does that mean that interpreters and translators and other support services out there are going to continue doing their work, right? So, or is it that you see way down the line that those services won't be there and AI will really be more central? No, Kara really believes that this AI is a tool, whether it's an interpreter or AI. People can use these tools to expand accessibility. Right. Okay. So it's really, that's your future, that those roles will still be there. Yeah, we think that we still need human involvement, because there's some particular really specific contexts and areas that AI can't understand. They can't understand everything. They do. AI does a good job in emergency situations or specific contexts where the AI is trained, where appropriate frameworks are provided, but it still requires a lot of ongoing monitoring. And when it comes to translations, we're actually seeing the hybrid translations that's really working. It's a good benefit. I know that the sign language database that you've been collating has around 10,000 signs or so now. And I was just thinking, is this something that the deaf community can see, have access to? Oh, it's important to realize that the database isn't like a dictionary. It's not something that you can go in and have a look around at, really. It's an internal thing that we use within Kara. But AI or the hybrid service will use that database. And so when translations are out there, and if you see something that you think, well, that's an unusual sign, or it's an unusual way that that's done, come and talk to us. Let us know which sign you prefer, and we can always have a look at that. We can replace, we can update. But in terms of the database being open to the public, no. And we're not here to take over the sign language dictionary either. That's not in our scope of work either. That's quite separate from the dictionary. We're about providing information. Hey, thanks for explaining that to the community and getting an idea of that. And that's also for the sign language dictionary. It's not something that this is about. And remember, as Grace said, if there are any words that you think aren't appropriate, you're not sure, if the signs aren't quite right, then please do contact them about that. Give them some feedback, and they can always improve. I was going to ask also about the conference in Boston. Noreen, you flew over to that, right? And so what did you learn from that? What were some of the key learnings for you that you would like to share with the deaf community? Well, I think there's a few things that were really standouts. I work in Kara, and there's a few things that I think I know about AI and about translation and about what's happening for sign language. But going there was really quite an eye opener for me. That Kara's quite unique. We're the only presenters at the conference who showed our system, showed our processes, how we work with our hybrid system. No other companies that were there did that. They just talked to their presentations, but they didn't kind of really create a transparent look into what they do. So that was quite an insightful point. Also, that I was surprised at how many AI companies there are out there working in sign language that do not have any deaf people involved. They do not have interpreters involved even. They only are using websites where there's information already out there and then scraping from them. But I didn't realize that that's actually how far it's gone, and bringing that information back to New Zealand. Like you say, we talk about ethics, we talk about values, and about Kara's doing a lot of work in trying to make things the best we can and make sure that it's the most appropriate. But really, there's other companies out there that are, because we're moving at a pace that's right. Others are moving ahead really, really quickly without the community, and that's something for us. We've talked about in CoSet or with WFD. There's a board that is talking about AI, or with the Whaikaha AI conversations. These are good opportunities to safeguard. And Kara's more than happy to be involved in any conversations about concerns about Kara, about what we're doing. You're more than welcome. And I think that in Boston, it was a proud moment actually, because, we were there. There's lots of US and ASL related work, but hey, here we are, we're Kiwis, first in the world to allow women the vote. Kara won the Startup Company of the Year award. That award isn't an accessibility award. That was across the entire board of technology in New Zealand as a startup across all companies. Kara won that award. It was amazing. There was a 2% chance. It was only a 2% chance, and we thought, well, there's no way we were going to win that award. Put in the application, and then let's just keep moving. And then we were shortlisted. We weren't expected to win. It's a really big surprise, and that's the sort of thing where you think, hey, sign language is the same as any other language. This is not just about accessibility. We're right there at the forefront of technology change, and we're passionate about that. And also, a positive thing from the Boston conference was that, there's other people who are also passionate about this, similar values, similar vision, really, really keen to have those conversations and develop those opportunities where and how this can happen. So like this podcast that you're doing, it's amazing. Like, how can this be sustainable? How can people out there be more effective with accessing sign language everywhere across all kinds of information? So, that's what I want to bring back to New Zealand and let you guys know about. Oh, hey, thanks so much for that, for sharing your key insights from the conference. And like you say, New Zealand's a small country, and you were able to go over to the States and talk about what you're doing, and also talk about commitments to sustainability and some of the risks around sign language and the dangers of appropriating sign language for uses that the community aren't a part of. So you're really wanting to come and align with the deaf community. So I really appreciate that, Noreen, for sharing with us your thoughts, and thank you to you both for coming and having the opportunity to communicate with the community. And thank you to the community for asking your questions. We really value this opportunity, and some of the questions will have been covered. But hey, that's awesome. Thanks for letting us know about your system. And it's quite inspiring because we're a small country. Yeah, we're doing a lot of really cool things here. I like to say, we're small but we're mighty. Yeah, yep, that's the Kiwis. All right, hey, thanks so much again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Rachel, and thank you to the deaf community for, please give us your feedback, your ideas, your questions. It's an opportunity for us to come and talk with you. We really value that. And if you're feeling like your questions weren't answered, we're more than happy. We're really keen to have the chat anytime. Yeah, and do follow Kara on Facebook, on social media, and on their website. have a look at their blog to gather more information about what they're doing. And there's some things that I've missed I didn't know about, so I'm going to go back to have a look at that after this interview. Yeah, we've got lots of blogs, and most of it's translated, and we're making sure it's all accessible. Awesome. Hey, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.